Good evening and welcome, Newark residents. Thank you for joining our last series introducing the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. I would like to take this time to welcome our panelists, 3rd Precinct Commanding Officer Captain Carvalho, Captain Cesar Suarez from Special Victims Unit, Director Eure from the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery, and I would like to acknowledge the East Ward Aide to the Mayor, Angela Williams. Tonight's meeting is specifically for the East Ward, but all are welcome to participate. During this meeting, you will learn about the office, what it does, how it operates, and much more. This meeting is interactive, and we ask that you share your questions via the Facebook comments or our Zoom Q&A. My name is Jennifer Fana, and I am the Administrative Assistant for the Newark People's Assembly. The office serves many purposes within the city, and some entail coordinating meetings like this to bridge the gap in communication. If you would like to stay informed, please register to our database by emailing us at newarkpeoplesassembly@ci.newark.nj.us with your interests. Myself, along with Ms. Andrea Mason, will be your host for the night. We are ready to start. Welcome, Ms. Andrea Mason.
Buenas noches a todos. Solo para decirles que tenemos intérpretes disponibles para esta conversación en español. Si necesitas traducción en español, haga clic en el botón Interpretación en la parte inferior e selecione Espanhol. Boa noite. Apenas para dizer que temos tradução também em português para esta conversa. Se quiser escutar a conversa em português, por favor, clique no botão Interpretação abaixo e selecione Português. Obrigada.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So thank you so much, Clara, for the translation. We want everybody to be able to tune in. So as was publicized, we do have the meeting simultaneously being translated in Portuguese as well as Spanish. So at this time, we are going to get a little introduction specifically about the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery from the director herself, Lakeesha Eure. So I believe Mrs. Eure may have some technical difficulties, so I will actually just read from the PowerPoint. Luckily, we do have it until she's able to join in. So Mayor Baraka recently tapped Lakeesha Eure, public health professional and grassroots community activist, as director for the new Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery, known as OVPTR. With this new appointment, Director Eure's responsibilities have expanded to bring her work with the West Ward Victims Outreach and Shani Baraka Women's Resource Center under the same umbrella, with oversight for related community-based violence prevention efforts, including the Mayor's New Brick City Peace Collective. And I do see Miss Eure. Perfect timing.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I apologize. I am having unstable internet connection, but thank you so much for introducing me. Again, my name is Lakeesha Eure, Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. I am a licensed clinical social worker. And I've been doing work in the city of Newark for over 5 years, and we have been working diligently around violence prevention programming, and ultimately to be able to produce community-based violence prevention programs through the city of Newark alongside law enforcement. Thank you.
So now getting into the meat and potatoes of the office, we would like to know specifically, what is it all about? How was it formed? What can we expect of it? And anything else you'd like to share regarding the new office?
In 2020, Mayor Baraka established the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. During a historic moment, he allocated an amount of 5% of the public safety's budget to build the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. This was during the wake of the George Floyd movement, where there was a rallying cry around defunding of the police, where around the nation there was there was police shootings, police brutality taking place, and there was a cry for law enforcement to be able to change its strategies and the ways that they deal with communities, specifically communities, Black and Brown communities, but ultimately wanting us to look at the interact with the community and people who are involved and who can intervene and help when they have issues related to mental health crises or any behavior issues. So we in the city of Newark established our Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery in the wake of the George Floyd movement. So the police, the precinct, the first precinct is going to be where the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery will be housed. In which case it is the precinct where the '67 rebellion sparked in the city of Newark. And so it has a historical context, in which case we're going to be doing some restorative justice, where this was once a place where people were being arrested and law enforcement was performing its duties, is now going to be a place of hope and healing as we build a museum on the first floor of the first precinct of this building for conflict resolution. So we're going to have a conflict resolution center inside of the first precinct where the Office of Violence Prevention will be housed.
So Director Eure, I know that the there is a scope of work and you have a bunch of partners that make up the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. We'd love to hear about those partners and just some of the things that they're doing or plan to do within the community.
We have developed a scope of work where we're developing a strategic plan to realize the mayor's aim to strengthen the collaboration and coordination between law enforcement and community-based public safety initiatives. We're going to be using data and research to inform the city's further investments in violence prevention. So we had My Brother's Keeper, who was helping us to pull together the strategic plan, and also Bloomberg and Associates, who's also been a major help in helping us to get the office implemented and stood up. We have several partners who have been working with us on this initiative. And we go to the next slide, we'll see in our communities. The next slide. Right, so we have an advisory group. And this advisory group consists of people who've been given recommendations.
Oh, Director Eure.
And direction for the office.
Director Eure, your
I'm going in and out.
connection is unstable. Yes.
Okay. So can you continue this portion and I'll come back in? Thank you.
Absolutely. So as we can follow on the screen, there is an advisory group that this office is, that advises the office. And it's made up of Katim Shara of My Brother's Keeper Newark, Princess 410, New York City Department of Health, Lakeesha Sherrills, Newark Community Street Team, Will Simpson of Equal Justice USA, Dr. Juan Rios, Seton Hall University Professor of Social Work, Kylisha Wingfield Hill with the City of Newark, and Shoshana Page, who is our Senior Policy Advisor and Communication Strategist with the City of Newark. I do want to acknowledge that Ms. Kettles has joined us. She is also one of the partners working within the, actually the manager of Shani Baraka Women's Resource Center. Will allow some time for Ms. Kettles to speak in a few. And can you go to the next slide, please? I'm trying to hold it down while we wait for Director Eure to get back on. So as you may be aware or not, there have been several priorities identified for this office to handle. So number one is supporting citizens to have an active role in creating public safety. Two is mobilizing law enforcement and community to focus on hotspots. Three is to shift the culture to think about trust, healing, and resilience. And four is to invest in the capacity of the Office of Violence and Trauma, Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. And I just want to take this moment to say all of those priorities that have been identified go hand in hand even with the priorities of Newark People's Assembly. And as you heard, Newark People's Assembly, we are the host of this community meeting and several others. But one thing that the mayor really wants is the feedback of the community. He wants to know your wants and needs. And that's why we really are engaging you and asking for your participation in these community meetings. So just as it says, you know, we want the support of the citizens. We want to mobilize law enforcement and community. We want that hand-in-hand interaction, that community-based policing, you know, that trauma to trust kind of support. And in all of that, there will be an investment in capacity for the office. So at this time, I would like to hear, I want to introduce formally the commanding officer of the 3rd Precinct, Captain Carvalho, excuse me, who represents the East Ward. Captain Carvalho, please start your video and you can unmute.
Yeah. Hi, good evening. Boa noite, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. I'm proud to present the 3rd Precinct here in the East Ward.
Captain Carvalho, I'll just ask you one question, and I know this is all new to us, but do you have any specific concerns or anything that you would like to see specifically as it relates to this new office and the 3rd Precinct? I know as Director Eure starts to explain a little more about what her office offers, you know, you'll probably have more of an answer later on in the segment, but just, you know, still preliminarily, just knowing what the office is called, do you have any like big thoughts or ideas about what you would like to see?
I'm actually very excited to work with Miss Eure. I met her maybe about 2 weeks ago, and I met with some of the counselors, and we got some good feedback from them. And the 3rd Precinct and the Newark Police Department is welcoming that organization with open arms. So I really look forward to moving forward with her.
Great. And I also noticed that Commanding Officer of Special Victims, Captain Soares, is on the line. At this time, can we hear from you?
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me once again. Again, my name is Cesar Soares. I'm the commanding officer of the Special Victims Division of the Newark Police Department. My unit is in charge of investigating all sexual related offenses, domestic violence, child abuse and neglect, and also missing persons. Once again, thank you for having me.
Sure, and I know that I do have a guest co-host, Katim Sharael, who's also on the advisory board. I'd like for him to introduce himself formally and And just as an advisor, I'd like to hear from him and what he's doing. And
Thank
I
you,
did
Ms. Mason.
actually put him on the spot, so I apologize,
No worries,
Kathleen.
no worries. I'm always happy to join the conversation talking about public safety in Newark and some of the exciting work that's coming out of the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery. For some reason, I can't get my camera on, so if the folks handling the tech can help me out with that, that'd be great. But I wanted to come back and talk a little bit about these priorities, and then maybe we can move to the next slide. So as we sort of sat around the table, thought really long and hard about how do we address some of the crime that's happening in our community, and really partner with law enforcement and share the burden of this challenge as a city, not just a policing responsibility, but a community responsibility. And looking at our crime data and looking at sort of the boots on the ground capacity that we have in terms of the number of organizations and individuals who are organized around this issue, we saw a real opportunity here to get more and more Newark residents actively involved in working to create public safety in their communities. And that looks like a number of ways. Some of the tried and true things we've done in the past, from organizing block watches, to engaging residents to really understand what the challenge that police officers have in doing their job day to day, so we have more of a bird's eye view into their world and can figure out ways that we can support them. But this conversation around the role of the community and working to create more public safety, that's something that you, Newark residents, will have a chance to help us co-create and come up with innovative projects and ideas that we can embark on. We know where crime is happening in Newark. The captain just spoke. He can zero in on the hot spots in the East Ward. And many of you who are listening today can tell us what those hot spots are. We want to really shine a spotlight on those areas and join law enforcement as a community to work on trying to improve public safety in those areas. Everything from looking at the environment where crime is happening. Do we have enough lighting? Do we have enough eyes on the streets in terms of cameras and businesses that are open and residents that are out and about in some of these areas so that we can deter crime? But really the second priority here is all about partnering with law enforcement to address the crime hotspots that we know from the data we have, and we know from the intelligence that you bring to the table in terms of your everyday experience living in the East Ward. And then this last point really goes to the heart and core of the work for the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery, is how do we heal from all of this? We are all reading the same headlines, we're all watching the same news reels, and we hear about the shootings, we hear about the robberies, we hear about the property damage, and we're impacted by that. But one of the things that we don't do enough of is talking about how that influences our decision. One real way that it influences our decision is the folks who decide to leave the city of Newark because of their concerns about public safety. How can we join arms together and acknowledge sort of the pain and the trauma caused by crime in the city, whether you've been directly impacted or not, and begin the healing process and demonstrate our resiliency in the face of such a big challenge. And so the Office of Violence Prevention, under the leadership of Director Eure, she wants to invest in that. She wants to develop programming around sort of that healing process so that we can collectively get over the trauma that we experience as a result of some of the crime in the city. And then the last point is, as Ms. Mason mentioned, building out this capacity for this office. We're one of the few cities in the country where the mayor has had the forward-thinking leadership to say, you know what, the community does have a role in making our city safe. How do we start to organize people around that? How do we start to invest in that? And so Director Eure is fastly bringing on staff, building out the capacity of the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery to engage Newark residents in this work. Next slide. So here's where we wanted to just kind of highlight some of the ideas that we have so far in terms of what we can do in some of these areas. And again, I'll go through these quickly because we want to hear from you in terms of what some of your suggestions are. So in terms of getting residents involved in creating public safety in the city, we know that that's going to require folks in the community having a deep ownership of this issue of public safety, getting out of the mindset that keeping us safe is just the police officer's job. No, it's everybody's job, from the person who sees something happening and is saying something, to the person who gets in the streets and intervenes in a situation, and the folks who organize the community to put positive in the places where there are negatives. So how do we create that sense of community ownership? One of the things that the research behind violence has really told us is that, you know, this issue of crime, this issue of violence in our community, it's not a morality argument. It's not a question of whether or not we got bad people and bad actors. Yes, that does exist. But one of the things that we have to look at is, what are the conditions that are creating the kind of crime that we see in our community? And so we see this as a public health issue. And with that, we're taking a public health approach. That means that we are looking to intervene in areas where there's high crime, but we're also trying to plant seed to prevent crimes from happening in our community. So we're using a public health approach as we think about violence prevention in the city of Newark. That also includes, you know, looking at the data and seeing what risk factors exist. Poorly lit streets, you know, not enough cameras in certain areas, whatever those environmental issues are that contributes to crime. We need your help in knowing what those are and doing something about them. And then lastly, the data. One of the things that Mayor Baraka embraced early on in his administration is the use of data to really guide decision-making and how we do our work. And so we want to put some of this data that we have on crime that's happening in the city in your hands so that you can help us make decisions on how we approach some of these issues. So be thinking about, how do you want to be involved in public safety? Next slide. So the second priority, and this really goes to the core of what I know a lot of folks in community experience in terms of, you know where crime is happening, you know where those hotspots are. Yes, we want to activate law enforcement to really zero in on those areas. They're already there. In some ways you may not know because some of their efforts are covert for a reason. But we want to bring you along in that journey. So that means that we want to take a collective impact approach where we're bringing the community together to really sort of shape a plan for how we address violence in these hotspots. That collective impact approach includes us looking at goals, right? Like really getting into that data and saying, what is sort of the benchmark for success that we want to have in terms of decreasing crime? Who are the partners that we need around the table? And what is it that we're going to do in a time-bound way to really try to decrease crime? And then, you know, the most important part of this whole collective impact approach is the accountability, that this transparency in terms of what we're going to do, who's going to do it, so that at the end of the day that you as a community can sit back and say, yes, that was done, no, this wasn't done, and hold the folks around the table accountable for getting the things that are outstanding along the way. And so we see this as a community-driven solution to public safety that involves you, Newark residents. So be thinking about how you want to partner with law enforcement in your area to address some of the crime hotspots. Next slide. So here goes back to that point I mentioned earlier in terms of, you know, we think about crime and safety in one bucket and we say it's the police's job to make our community safe, but rarely do we take the time to think about the impacts on us as residents, either experiencing crime or being aware that crime is happening. So this, again, kind of using that public health approach pulls us into a broader conversation about poverty, about racism, about access to jobs and health and good schools, And so while this is a conversation about violence in our community, we also know that these other issues are connected. And so we want to work with partners like the school district, our charters and our businesses and our healthcare providers to figure out what we can do together to address these issues and create more healing and resilience. So you should be thinking about, in your community, in the East Ward, who else do we need around the table? Not just us as residents, not just law enforcement, but who are those other partners that can help us address some of these underlying issues, from housing to jobs to environmental justice, whatever those issues are, so that people are whole. And, we, one, prevent people from committing crimes and getting into that life. And two, we ensure that those who are in that world have a way out. Next slide, please. And then lastly, not to belabor the point, we've got to invest in the capacity of the Office of Violence Prevention. And here we just outline a few of the things that's happening. As I mentioned before, Director Eure is bringing on a dynamic staff that are going to help lead this work, that have the experience and the qualifications to really help us move this forward. We know that even with the best qualified staff, we're going to have to do a lot of training and professional development. And we hope that some of that training and professional development will be open to you and that you'll take advantage of it so that you can be a partner with us as we work together to create more safety in our community. And as I mentioned before, Mayor Baraka is committed to using data, not only to make decisions, but to hold ourselves accountable. And so we're looking at crime stats all across the city. We're looking at the crime hotspots all across the city, and we're identifying key performance indicators that tell us whether or not we're making a difference. And so we really want to use the data as our sort of measuring stick for success. And yes, the data is numbers, but the data is also your stories. And so look out for more opportunities like this to engage with us around the table so you can tell us the basic question: do you feel safe? And do you feel any safer as a result of the work that we're able to do together? So both the numbers matter, but your reality matters too. Next slide. I won't spend a whole lot of time here on the various programs, but I'll just highlight just a couple so you can get a flavor for what these ideas look like in practice. So many of you have heard about Mayor Baraka's signature public safety initiative, the Newark Community Street Team. They're a community level violence interruption program that engages residents in the community to get with other folks in the community who may be a part of committing crimes in our neighborhood. This work has been wildly successful in the South Ward, and we're beginning to see real promising results in the West Ward. And this is just an example of one program that may be of benefit to my neighbors in the East Ward. The last thing I'll say on this slide, just to give you an idea of the program so you can understand the breadth of who's involved, right? So we've got community-based organizations like Newark Community Street Team, but we have institutional partners like our hospitals who are also actively involved in this work. University Hospital has one of the first hospital-based violence intervention programs in the state. And it's real simple to understand. So if somebody gets shot, where are they going to go? They're going to go to a hospital. And how do we use that as an opportunity to intervene and prevent retaliatory violence, because now you're worried about who that person has to go after because they were shot. Now you're worried about if there are more people who might be involved and be in danger. And so the hospital provides a place for us to really intervene and prevent more crimes from happening. And we're super excited that University Hospital has doubled down on this work and joined us as a partner. Next slide. So in terms of getting law enforcement on board and working together with the community to focus on crime hotspots, a couple of examples I'll mention. One is another initiative started by Mayor Baraka, bringing all the community-based organizations who've been working on this issue of violence prevention in our community together under the banner of Brick City Peace Collaborative. And the Brick City Peace Collaborative includes 16 organizations that meet on a regular basis, looking at the data, trying to figure out what can we do as community-based organizations and residents in the community to support law enforcement in reducing crime. Right now, that effort is focused on a catchment area in the South Ward, but this is our pilot, and we're learning things as we do the work in the South Ward that may be able to be brought to the East Ward with a set of partners who are actively involved in the community there. Another element, just to kind of give you an idea of how the community gets involved and at the table with law enforcement, is an initiative that was started by the Newark Community Street Team called the Public Safety Roundtables. Public Safety Roundtables. These are meetings where you have a chance to talk regularly with the captain and other top brass from the police precinct in the East Ward about some of the crime trends and incidents that are happening in the community. But we don't stop at just the problems. It's an opportunity for some collaborative problem solving between residents and law enforcement. And one example of an issue that the group has taken up in the South Ward Public Safety Roundtable, and I'm sure they're doing the same in the West Ward, is looking at stolen car thefts and coming up with strategies to both message that people shouldn't be leaving their cars running unattended, but also strategies to intervene in sort of crime networks that are a part of that. But those are the kind of conversations that you can have as a part of a public safety roundtable in the East Ward with law enforcement and community at the table. We'll hear in a little bit from the team at the Shani Baraka Resource Center, so you can understand like some of the resources that exist in the community for people who are impacted by violence. But this is just a great example of how we can target all of these resources in some of the crime hotspots. Next slide. And again, all of these are just examples of what the work could look like to just give you a flavor for what's ahead and what's currently happening. I'll highlight as we try to, really attend to this issue of how we're impacted by violence. One of our chief partners has been a national organization, Equal Justice USA, that set up shop here in Newark, and they've hosted these trauma to trust trainings that brings the community together with law enforcement to really try to create a mutual understanding of what it's like being on the front lines of trying to keep our city safe, what it's like being a resident and witnessing violence in our community and how we're impacted by that. And through that exchange, really powerful conversations about race, about economic inequities happen. And we get to a place where we can at least understand each other. And the hope is that we support each other in the work ahead to create more safety in our community. And East Ward residents are invited to participate in these trauma to trust trainings. They happen on a fairly regular basis, so look out for more information on this opportunity. Next slide. I think here is now, Andrea, where I turn it over to you and the team to share some data on the crime that's happening in the city.
We will turn it directly over to Tyus, who will speak about the stats.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Katim. Good evening, East Ward. Thank you for having us here. With the help of the Office of Public Safety, we made these graphs. The first graph shows the citywide crime complaints from 2018 to 2020. The blue bars represent the pre-pandemic data, while the green bars represent part of the pandemic data. There are three trend lines. We have the orange trend line, which represents the pre-pandemic trend, while the yellow trend line shows the 3-year trends. And finally, we have the gray trend line, which shows just the pandemic trends. Next to this graph, we have the citywide crime complaints, but disaggregated by precinct. And for this ward, we are focusing on a third precinct, so the gray bar. This is for the data for the last quarter of 2020. By the time we made these graphs, we didn't have the complete data for the first quarter of 2021. So this is why we're only showing the data until last year. Next slide, please. Just like the previous graph, we have the citywide murder complaints, and the blue bars show the pre-pandemic data, while the green bars show part of the pandemic data. And next to it, we have also the citywide murder, but disaggregated by precinct for the last quarter of 2020. So once again, we have to focus on the gray bar for the third precinct. Next slide, please. And finally, we have the domestic violence incidents for 2018 to 2020. We don't have this data disaggregated by precinct, so this is why we have only shown the citywide incidents. And once again, the blue bars represent the pre-pandemic data, and then the green bars represent part of the pandemic data. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you so much, Tyus, for that informative report. And at this time, we would like, before we start our community conversations, we would like to have Ms. Kettles introduce herself and give us a quick overview on the resources available at the Shani Baraka Center. Ms. Kettles?
Okay. My video is disabled. However, greetings, everyone. My name is Janice Kettles. I'm the manager / grief specialist at the Shani Baraka Women's Resource Center, located at 300 Clinton Avenue. Our phone number is 973-733-7538. We have counselors for the following free services: domestic violence, we have a victim advocate, we have women's programming, sexual assault, substance abuse, housing assistance, mental health, and computer assistance. We are open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., but as we move further and further under the umbrella of the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma, under the leadership of Director Eure, we will be extending our hours and working alongside with public safety. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kettles, for providing that insightful information. And so at this time, we are going to begin our community conversation. As mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, this is an interactive portion of our presentation. And if you have any questions, feel free to share them on our Facebook comments, or if you are tuning in through Zoom, in the Q&A portion. And so the first question that I will ask our residents and our attendees is, what other priorities or activities would you like to see the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery focus on? We have one comment, and that is the resident would like for the office to focus on crime. If any of our captains would like to add to that response.
I think that this is Captain Soares. I think that question would be more geared towards the precinct commander as far as proactive patrol against crime.
Right. Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. We had a little trouble with the audio. Yeah, in regarding to crime, our precinct runs 24 hours, 7 days a week. We have a lot of different subcomponents here. Patrol, we have a detective bureau. We address quality of life issues. That's one of our biggest concerns here in the third precinct. What I do is I have a real-time crime analysis. So as soon as a crime is reported, whatever assets that I have, I address them accordingly in order to address any crime spikes. Hopefully I answered that person's question.
Yes, thank you so much. And if you can add on, how often do your officers engage with the community? How often do they go into our complexes and interact with our residents?
The third precinct has 2 officers who are dedicated as community service officers. So on a daily basis, we're out there touching people in housing complexes, in schools, in churches, uh, different civic organizations, the Boys Club. Uh, they go to the parks. We do community walks. I'm out there with them, and just listening to the people and listening about their concerns, and whatever insight that they have, and we work as a team in order to get our goals accomplished here.
Thank you so much. I want to read a couple of comments that came in pertaining to the first question. A resident shared immediate attention to residents who witness first-hand violence around their home. If the leadership from the Office of Violence Prevention can talk about how they will be able to address the need of that resident.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the comment. I'm back, and Katine did a wonderful job getting the rest of the slides in. We have social workers, case managers, and victim advocates that we just hired on the team. And as a suggestion that you just made to the person who made that comment, we will be able to pay more attention to residents who witness violence firsthand. We know that trauma is not only direct, but it's vicarious. So the people who witness it are also affected and impacted. So we will make sure that we do a better job at paying attention to those people who've been impacted by taking the information. When we come to the scenes, we will do wellness checks in the area with the people who may have witnessed, and to ask them and offer resources for them as if they were a direct victim as well.
Thank you so much, Director. And now we can move on to our second question, and is, what could make our programs better?
I apologize. I didn't come off of mute, and I did get a comment after Tuesday's conversation in the Central Board, and I'd like to read it. And it was specific to that first question about what are some other priorities that they would like to see. So it reads, there's a program around DC that is called Generation Hope, and she gives the website, which provides resources and assistance to pregnant teen mothers. This might seem completely unrelated to the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery, but due to the overlap in issues related to trauma, homelessness, lack of access to certain resources, especially healthcare related resources for those victims who have been injured, etc., there will be certainly an opportunity to exchange best practices and lessons learned for community outreach and providing resources. So Director Eure, I'll most certainly forward you this email, but I definitely wanted to mention it in a public setting, that providing programs for pregnant teen moms is a consideration.
And that's starting to be a reoccurring theme. So even while we're in training and workshops and orientation with my staff,
You're on mute, Director.
Can you hear me? So even with my training and orientation with the new staff, that's a reoccurring theme that seems to be coming up around teen moms. And so we have a portion of the violence prevention that's going to be intervening early intervention. So we're going to be working with teen moms and people who've been affected by postpartum depression, moms, teenagers, and just mothers in general, because we know that during the lifespan, depending on what the pregnancy was like for the mom, trauma gets trickled down through through the baby, and people who experience trauma, who experience depression, mental health issues, crisis. We know that it trickles through the lifespan. So we will be focusing in on and having a part of the early intervention piece, working with moms, young children, babies, through early adolescence. So we will have a portion for that, and we will start to focus on that, and we will take the suggestion and any programs that are functioning nationally that addresses those issues. We will take the suggestions.
That's great to hear. Appreciate it.
I would like to read a comment from one of our residents, and she stated, "We have actual video tape evidence of heavy drug activities. How can we implement police cameras in the hotspots and more police presence?"
Does someone from law enforcement want to take that?
Okay, in regards to that, you can email me that information, or you can stop by the precinct, and then we'll address that. Or
Could you be
unless that
so
person wants. I'm sorry.
could you be so kind to share your email address?
Sure. It's going to be Carvalho, CARVALHOJ at ci.norc.nj.us.
Thank you so much. An additional comment that was shared about what can make our programs better, and the residents shared for the programs to come into all of our neighborhoods. And so, Director, if you want to talk about how the office will be going into all of the wards and providing the services.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the comment because we do know that the South Ward and the West Ward essentially is known to have the most crime and violence. Statistically, that's what the data shows. And so we normally put all of our resources into those areas, and we have the Central Ward, the East Ward, and the North Ward that feels left out. And so I often hear, well, what about the North Ward and what about the East Ward? But we do know that crime and violence is starting to, increase in those areas as well. So I have a VOCA team, Victims of Crime Act team, and we are funded to go into North, South, East, West, and Central wards of the city where we will be opening up offices. Or if we don't open an office, we're going to partner with the offices that already exist there to be able to provide the services. We know that people don't have trust with systems and social service systems. And so they're not just going to readily walk in and say, I need help, especially because we know that the culture in many of these areas have been traumatized. And so we're looking to partner with places like Ironbound Community Corporation, La Casa Don Pedro, and the North Ward Community Center, East Ward Community Centers, and liaisons from the mayor's office to be able to help connect us to these communities so that they don't feel ostracized and left out. So we are partnering, and we are going to put services in these communities as well. Just because the data don't show the great need, we're still going to put clinical therapists and outreach workers in the area and victim advocates to help people feel supported who've been victims of crime and violence.
Thank you so much. And now to move on to the last question of our community conversation. And the question is, based on your awareness of available public safety, violence prevention, and victim services, what do you see as being the need the most? Just like Director Eure just shared, as the East Ward members, what is some of the biggest needs that you all see needed in your ward? And if you can be so kind to share that in the comments.
So as everybody is thinking and hopefully writing in the comments, I do see that there is a comment about needing more engagement, or I guess compassion and empathy from the public safety staff. The comment specifically is that homeowners come down to the precincts, but captains, well, this one says specifically the captain is nonchalant, but I do know that we sometimes get that complaint throughout the city. So it's how can we provide training to our public safety, really all staff, everybody really needs to show compassion and empathy to others, but specifically public safety, just because of the realm in which, you know, they're handling people. So I don't know if I changed that comment to a question, but it was actually a comment to say that we need to show more empathy and compassion to those residents that express a need or express that they need help. And I also want to add, just from my experience working in the East Ward and actually getting to know quite a few East Ward residents, as I've been doing a lot of this work over the last couple of years with Newark People's Assembly, just the amount of undocumented residents that we have. So I believe that a need is advocacy and just safe havens where they feel comfortable getting documents translated, being able to come and talk about, you know, what may have happened that they don't feel is fair. Just having somewhere of comfort and safe havenness, if that's such term, because I do know that sometimes people that don't speak the language or aren't from a specific area, they feel like they may be targeted. So I believe that that's definitely a need, specifically in engaging the East Ward residents. I really don't see any other comments. The East Ward crowd is kind of shy tonight. And the interpreters don't have any comments coming from their respective languages. So I don't believe that there are any other comments, Jen.
Okay, so that concludes our community conversation. Thank you so much to the residents that did share input and provided some insight on how we can prioritize and make our programs better. Next slide, please. So at this time, we're going to have, as you see on the screen, we have a community survey, and this is specifically for your ward, so you can take a picture of the Q&R code and complete the survey. This would allow us to have better understanding of your needs, and we can also utilize the data as informed in our meeting to create trainings and programming and have a better decision-making strategy, because it will be with your data that you provide. So please take a picture of the Q&R code and complete the survey.
And I'd just like to take a couple moments to just sort of recap the meeting before we end officially for those that may have tuned in a little late. So tonight we heard from Director Lakeesha Eure about the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery, and program led by Janice Kettles at the Shani Baraka Women's Resource Center, which is just one of the many programs that the office is making available for the community. We also heard from important law enforcement partners such as Captain Cesar Soares of Special Victims Unit and Captain Carvalho, the commanding officer of the 3rd Precinct, which represents the East Ward. And I'm going to add that there are so many resources throughout the city. Please, we are here for you. Take advantage, and that's advantage in a good way. People are getting paid to provide these services. We need you in order to do our jobs effectively. So this office was created by Mayor Baraka as an unprecedented move to strengthen coordination between law enforcement and community-based public safety initiatives in preventing violence and supporting victims. Thank you so much for joining our meeting today. Your participation was important to the city. And just to go over a few things, we heard about important suggestions from you about key priorities for this office that include proactive patrol against crime. The third precinct incorporates a real-time crime analysis to respond to any crime spikes. Immediate and ongoing victimization support services for not just those directly impacted by violence, but also for the witnesses. How to maintain a consistent and robust presence in all neighborhoods, especially in neighborhoods with hotspots. And prioritizing and expressing empathy when engaging with city residents. The second sort of aspect of things that was discussed was the services that could be improved according to you. And that's revisiting the efficiency or the efficacy and communications around community block watch efforts and partnering with community-based organizations and supporting their capacity to serve their local neighborhood. And if you've been following Newark People's Assembly, you know that that is one of the main things that we're charged with, creating block watch, tenant associations, neighborhood associations, building a comprehensive database, because we know that where there is organization and structure, there's less crime. So this office welcomes the community to strategize together and become a national model. It was a very rich conversation. I thank you very much for your participation and your recommendations. And as Ms. Fana just mentioned, please take a picture of that QR code. We definitely need your suggestions, your opinions via the survey. If you're not able to respond to the survey using the QR code, probably by Monday, I'll be sending out a survey, an email link that you can complete the survey. And this one is, the QR code is specifically East Ward specific, but the links that I send out later, you'll be able to fill out, and I believe that it'll be for everyone. We just definitely want to hear from you as we shape the Office of Violence Prevention and Trauma Recovery moving forward. I thank everybody for tuning in. Director Eure or other panelists, do you have any final thoughts or words? I'd like to thank the IT team definitely for always making this happen. And of course, our translators, Esmeralda and Jorge, for this evening's translation services. Director Eure?
I don't have anything for the evening. I certainly apologize for my technical difficulties.
So
I
excellent.
think that I probably went out again.
So that's no problem. We appreciate just everybody getting in where they fit in. A great big shout out to the one that became another co-host, Katim. You did a wonderful job. Hopefully you're not trying to take Director Eure's job, because you just ran through those slides and knew that information very well. So I appreciate everybody's time and energy in making sure that this meeting was a success and that it happened. Thank you, Bloomberg Associates and team. Until next time, we will see you then. God bless you and have a great night.